you for it very softly, very softly, very softly. My spirit broke her fast on you, and Turk, you fed her with the breath of your neck, the breath of your neck, the breath of your neck.
Because I was a teacher for a long time, and I trust that I haven't lost the knack of projecting my voice into a room of unruly teenagers. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for being here along to show this cold February evening. This February is full of draughts and cracks, as Rosemary Tonks said in one of the poems we're going to read tonight. And we are here to celebrate her poetry. Some of you know her very well. I see relatives and admirers, presidents of clubs, fan clubs. And some of you may not know Rosemary at all, the poetry of her character. So we are here to find who is she and to find more about her strange and distinctive life and poetry. Before we get down to the literature, let's do some practicalities and some introduction first. I'm Rafael Cruz, El Penelope, and I'm the founder of Gold Star Books, which is a small publishing house based in London and specializing in translations of poetry to and into and from English, mostly Spanish and Catalan, but I've just been running it for a couple of years, so maybe French eventually, but for the time being, taking in steps. Elena Medina is here, and she's a writer and poetry lover, and she's here to read some of the poems of Rosemary. And Kevin Harrison, Zach, he's a producer for ITV News, and he's been working with me, helping me organize this event, and with Gold Star Books generally. He likes the project, and he's on board. So we are organizing a lot of things together. We hope that this will be the first of several, of many events like this, in which we aim to mostly resurrect dead poets that may be well known or not so well known, and the idea is to do a kind of séance poetique in which we conjure the spirit of this poet by means of a combination of biography and reading the poems of the person. Sometimes we'll do something with somebody who's not so dead, but mostly the idea is this idea of the séance, okay? To conjure the spirit of this poet. We are in the Queen's Head in Soho, and this seems to be a very good place to start our path. Rosemary Tonks was herself, in some respects, the Queen of Soho at one time, and one of a tribe of Bedouins of the London evening, in her own words. She was the toast of London, the bohemian, the literary society, and it was a time that was very exciting in London, and in Soho in particular. Things were changing, and everything seemed to be about to get better, or transformative, and somehow after the war and, the after post-war austerity, all the destroyed houses and all that, seems that they were building a new Britain, a new London, the Beatles and all that. It was a very exciting time when she was writing. Will is the manager of this place, and he's an actor and a publisher, and he also has a passion for poetry, and he has lent us this place today to do this event, and hopefully other events that we'll do in the future. As I have said to him, this is the last independent pub in Soho. The last independent pub in Soho. It means that the rest are all chain or owned by breweries, you know. So as I said to Will, this reminds me a little bit of the Gaul village in Asterix. Like outposts of resistance against the Romans, hordes, the imperialists and all that. So we're trying to cash in on that, not cashing because we're not charging, but kind of like revive the spirit of Bohemian Soho, the Colony Club, a little bit of that, you know, as much as possible, joining forces, Ghost Star Books, you guys here, and we in this battle. So thanks. It helps him, and therefore it helps all of us, if you buy your drinks up here in this bar, not downstairs. Because the money in this bar kind of, we're not going to make money, but it just goes against the, you know, that kind of, you know how it works. So if you buy here, the money means that we don't have to pay rent, and they will get the money anyway. It's not for us really, but if you can buy the drinks here, it will help the project and you know, the evenings. That's Tuesday over there. He's managing the bar, and it's funny, it's Tuesday because today is Monday. I love your name. It reminds me of a song by the Rolling Stones. Goodbye, Ruby Tuesday. The name of you. Tuesday, our own Tuesday here. Okay, so we're here for poetry, not for drama. So hopefully nothing will go wrong. But I'm obliged to say, for health and safety, that if the alarm goes, we will have to go in an orderly fashion. We're on a first floor, so there's plenty of time to do. We're not here for drama, we're for poetry. But if for any reason we hear an alarm, we have to not panic and go in orderly. We will all be safe. Okay, it's better not to panic. Okay, if you're tweeting or whatever it's called now, Xing or whatever, and Instagramming and all these things, please help everybody, the bar, the Coastal Books. If you tag Coastal Books, Kevin Harrison, who's got his own profile there, or indeed Queen's Piccadilly. It's just good for this. Okay, the evening will build itself like this. We will detail Rosemary's remarkable life with readings from the poetry. There will be a short pause. Before we will play a very short BBC program she did, so you hear her voice, the sounds. We can hear her. There will be a break for drinks. And after the break, Gabriel Moreno, who's a very fine poet from Gibraltar, he's not here because he's coming at 8, he's coming from another place. And he's a very good musician, and he's going to play us a song to start the second part. A song about a very famous French artist, woman, in the 19th century, Suzanne Valadon, which we thought it would be a nice thing to tally with Rosemary's bohemian sort of spirit, you know, which was very French. She lived in Paris and she admired the French poets over there, Hamburg. So we've invited him, and he's going to play us a song. 8:30, I suppose. So after the second part, we will do more readings. We will carry on with the life, and then we've got here Catherine Gray, who's a very good poet, who's got a book called Hollywood or Home, that I love, and she uses famous films or actors or scenes from films in her poems to talk about, you know, herself, the war. It's absolutely brilliant. I really love it. And Hollywood Home, I don't know if she's got some copies here. If she does, maybe she can sell you one for we're selling everything from a tenner, for a tenner this evening. If not, of course, you can buy it in the usual suspects. You find her name and the book, no? Okay. Okay, and she's going to read us a poem included in this book called Bournemouth, because Bournemouth is where Rosemary lived in the second part of her life, and she died there. She's not buried there, but she died there. And Catherine wrote a very nice poem inspired by Bournemouth, and she will read the poem in English, of course. And I've translated this poem into Spanish, and because Ghoster Books is all about using translation of poetry as a bridge between cultures, well, I will read my own translation of Bournemouth later. Okay, and then maybe I will ask, why did you write that poem? And I will hit a Q&A session where all of you can ask me, Martin, or whoever, Kevin, or you can comment. You don't have to ask questions, you know, it's Q&A, but comment whatever you want to say about what we are, her poetry, her life, her legacy, and why are we here tonight. Okay. Yeah, that's it. And we've got Neil Astley from Blood Axe Books. He has very kindly, he was supposed to be here, but he can't. But he has sent us some 20 copies of the book. Can I have a copy of Rosemary's? This is the only book that exists now of Rosemary's poetry. This is all her poetry. She only wrote 2 books, one in 1961 and the other, 61, 62? 63. The year set was invented. Okay, I'm very bad with numbers, as you can see. 1963, 1967, the second? Got that right. 1967, so it's 2 moments of the 60s. Both books are here. And Neil has been very kind to send us the book, and we sell it for a tenner with everything. My books from Gold Star, if you're interested, they cost a tenner. And Toby, who is over there, is going to be managing the shop. Thank you, Toby. So anything you want to buy, if you can have a look at the books later, or presumably you will want to buy your Rosemary book because you're going to be enticed by the readings, you know? So this is the most important one too. Okay, that's it. Yeah, I must tell you that she wrote those 2 slim poetry collections, but she also wrote how many novels? 6?
6 and 1 unpublished one and 2 children's books.
Okay. So the novels, everything has been out of print for reasons that we will learn for a long time. And Virago are going to publish all the novels. For the time being, there is Lonta, and they are publishing all of them. So good news for Rosemary Tonks, for readers or for people who want to know about her. So the Rosemary Tonks revival starts now in this cold night of February, roughly. Every artist, every author is unique, of course. We are all unique. That goes without saying. But Rosemary was unique in that ultimately she did not want her books to be read. And I don't mean that she wrote for her own private pleasure with no hope of publication. She wanted her books destroyed. And she did her level best to achieve this. Rosemary's great niece here, is she here?
She's on her way.
Lucy.
Also Lily.
Of course, yes, Lily.
We've got some relatives here.
Yeah.
She said to us last month that her great aunt would have been most displeased at what we are about to do tonight here. Why she renounced to poetry and all this is something we are going to come to in the evening. But as we will see, the seeds of that rejection of poetry, of literature, of her lifestyle, were sown very early on. It wasn't always like this, though. As I said, she was the queen of Soho at some point in the 60s. The picture you see of her here at this London coffee house in the 1960s represented a time where she was proud to be an author, a trendsetter, someone who influenced other writers, and someone who set the stage for this famous 1960s in London, in Britain, in the war, but in London in particular, wasn't it? She was briefly very prolific despite the slim volume. 2 collections of poetry, 2 books for children, sonomontage for the BBC, all 6 novels, 7 that was destroyed for reasons we will learn. All this crammed in the period between 1963 and the early 70s. There was this 7th novel, famous, far longer than the other 6. But having spent years and years working on this novel, she destroyed. And to this day, there is no copy, there's no record of it, we don't know. But she claimed it was her War and Peace, and she meant it. It was her best and magnum opus. She destroyed it. It's perhaps no accident that her first poetry collection came in this 1963, as the great Philip Larkin said when the Beatles' first LP came out and sexual intercourse began. It's her 2 volumes of poetry, not the novels that we are here to mark tonight. The first one of 1963 is called Notes on Cafes and Bedrooms, and the second one of 1967, The Iliad of Broken Sentences. Let us go to 1963 and hear Love Territory, the poem she had wanted Philip Larkin to include in his anthology of 20th century poetry. It was in the end Larkin's choice, but let's take a listen to a poem she evidently rated very highly.
Love Territory for F.U. He's timid with woman, and the dusk is excruciating, the bronze-brown autumn dusk, and the half-lit territories of street and bed and heart are savage and full of risk. On bronze nights when the territory is half-lit by casual glances, he sweats, each step is hideous. Once he knows his strength, of course, he will be ruthless. Bedrooms, he'll force an entrance on an evening full of leaves and blood and water by the elemental half-light of a passing glance. Oh, these brown nights are excruciating, when the quarter's full of gold air, very cold to breathe. Lovers embrace at dusk with an enlightened coarseness that makes the frigid grind their teeth. In the deep bronze, when he goes out to acquit himself, it's treacherous and elemental in the half-dark of a street, a bed, a heart, and also modern, young, and gentle.
This poem, Love Territory, was dedicated to F.U. The F.U. to whom Rosemary dedicated this poem in her first collection is a male admirer, or a lover, called Francis, I never pronounced this name correct, Urquhart?
Urquhart. Yeah.
Urquhart, who was not her husband. Imagine that, her first collection of poetry with the initial poem dedicated to someone else. We will talk about Rosemary's marriage later this evening, and it's fair to say that her book was dedicated to her husband, Mike, or Mickey. But the FU dedication is quite powerful on the first poem. As for the actual poem that Kevin has just read, of Territory, it was described by Patrick McGuinness as possessing an undertow of sexual menace and carnal scavenging. Scavenging. It's a lot of that. 9 years ago, Patrick McGuinness wrote in the London Review of Books, "The 1950s street lamps of Soho and of London make her wall a grimy of gold, and she was at home here and prowled these streets confidently." In making that the opening poem of her first collection, she was saying something new and making a statement. We are firmly in that 1963 of Larkin's. That 1963 when sexual intercourse began. Rather late for poor old Larkin, between the end of the Chatterley Band and the Beatles' first LP. Not too late for Rosemary. But there is already present here, in this poem just read, something essential in Rosemary's poetry. A kind of ambiguity or ambivalence. Everything is both good and bad, or bad and good. And more often than not, some kind of pearl can be extracted from the mud. She was a London poet in many ways, Queen of Soho. But she was born in Gillingham in Kent in 1928. Her father was an engineer, and he died of black water fever in Africa before she was born. Rosemary and her mother moved house 14 times during the war, in her own words, to avoid bombs and people. She was sent from an early age to school in Bournemouth. Bournemouth, the name. Bournemouth. It represents a lot of things in the English mind. Where you go to live when you are retired, where, you know, you go for a peace and quiet life, but you don't know that there is where Mary Shelley died as well, and I believe she's buried with Shelley's heart, which was rescued from a pyre in a fire in the Ricci in Rome, with Byron and others, and they got the heart of Shelley and gave it to Mary, who kept it, the heart of Shelley, until 1868, when she died, a long time after him. And she kept the heart, and she instructed that her heart, Shelley's heart, would be buried with her. And there is, everybody visits Rome, so glamorous, the Protestant cemetery. Don't we love that? But the heart is in Bournemouth, the name. We'll talk about it later. Her mother, faced with the trials of widowhood and World War II, increasingly turned to religion and to healers and soothsayers. It was not a conventional childhood for her daughter. Perhaps speaking through the medium of Sophie in her novel The Halt During the Chase, Rosemary once spoke about her mother like this. Occasionally my mother would play at being my mother. It was likely this was taken from real life. Elena is now going to read a poem called Bedroom in an Old City.
In the room with the watermark as rich as sago on the wall, the young head of a Manx asleep sheds on cheap linen the pale silk hair of baby Kensington. An apricot fabric hanging in wads lightly grimed at mid-morning. The furnishings have picked themselves clothing as country bushes with hooks are able to dress from passing children. A tumbler of green beach glass with sun spillings, bright water ovals firm on dust, is the bedside comfort. Against hair and sheet, the mesmerized face is very slightly active. Paint burns from yesterday's gouache are healing on the mouth. It passes some great supernatural illness with the zither of a little healthy breath. the shorthand typist at 17. On either side of warm nostrils, she presses crossly to her cheek the stiff gilt lashes of a court page. In the under frame of the window, bidding records a lorry from the world, bass of a giant cello string. A chest of drawers take the itch of the infection. Streets have begun. A lapel dog with goblet eyes of hot nicotine stamps on brass toes to where a black tree eats gravel. The snout at the urinal shiny as the chin pad of a violin. Laborers, their ringlets scented with blue grease, assemble at some work of colored mud. A tradesman with a specific violence and well-being of butchers steps out for his attractive marble shop of quartered bodies. Glazed cheeks of the very best meat, these have been costly feeders since he was a young soldier, handsome as a tulip, and badly finished at the hands. In the distance, weather can be seen thrusting and gleaming. A diamond cutter has been over the metropolis. The atmosphere has spat once or twice on fish and magazines. A sharp piece of blonde sugar rattles in the mouth of a newsboy. He lubricates and passes with a humid bag of language. Infant snob. He adjusts precautiously his printed jargon sheets to door and nameplate. With its ingenious crimes, the civilization is comprehensive. It is not necessary to take the rest of the world seriously. But in order that they may be said to think deeply, people go to the trouble of believing their opinions even when they are alone. And when she wakes, this London minx of 17, the whole city, the whole imperial rubbish heap of wastrels, scullions, houris, phones, and Bedouin, will look to this pillow where a life so young, secret, and clean opens its eyes that it puts mortality in doubt for possibly 40 seconds.
Again, in this poem we see that ambiguity I mentioned before. In this case, an ambiguity I'm sure many of us here, Londoners, feel about this city, about sex in this city, about relationships in this city, about life in this city, about life itself, to be or not to be in London or not to be in London. That is the question. Rosemary knew and loved many cities apart from London. She recognized both the atmosphere and the addictive nature of London life. After this city, she said, which is so dirty, so impossibly difficult to live in, you could never bring yourself to respect another, which made living easy. Cryptic. To be or not to be. London or not London. Bournemouth, maybe. In 1840, American author Edgar Allan Poe published a short story called The Man in the Crowd. In it, he described a man who wanders in an unhurried fashion and without any particular direction through the city streets, observing the people around him. And French poet Charles Baudelaire, who was one of Rosemary Tonks' idols, recognized in Poe's Man of the Crowd the embodiment of a uniquely modern urban sensibility, the figure of what he called the flâneur, which comes from the verb flâner in French, which means to stroll, to saunter. For Baudelaire, the flâneur was a passionate spectator who managed to blend into the crowd unnoticed as he keenly observed the world around him. And I think that describes our poet, Rosemary. I believe that she fashioned herself as a London-based female Baudelaire. We're going to read now, Kevin's going to read the Flaneur of the Apocalypse.
The Flaneur and the Apocalypse. For his inebriated tread, the whole of Europe, with its great streets full of air and shade, its students and cocottes and traffic roughly caked with blood, is not enough. Whole of Europe put to sleep by music, coal fires, snow, and cafe life, and suffocated by hot fogs and poppies, and rocked by lovers, like a chest of breath, is not, for the Flaneur, drug strong enough. A Europe motionless with dust and night, as if a squid her bag had emptied, as if a doormat had been shaken over it, is not mysterious enough for his infatuated tread. The Furies are modern. They don't drive you, they entice with cafes, lovers, dusty streets, with the apocalypse. Not this one, but the next, they hiss.
Rosemary was not particularly happy at her boarding school in Bournemouth. She was clever and intellectual, but she was very badly behaved. She disliked many of her teachers. She was rebellious. She left school at 16. She later wrote, "I ruined my school days by my inability to control myself." It's possible that her bad behavior was informed by all sorts of physical conditions she suffered. She had problems with her eyesight, which deteriorated through her teenage years, and she returned to London with her mother, with little money, and she started to devour writers and poets like James Joyce and, yes, Charles Baudelaire, discovering public libraries, as she would say. We're going to read now, Elena is going to read The Solitary's Bedroom.
Now for the night, liquid or bristling, when owls make the ink squeak at my window, and my bedroom that can bone my body of its will drinks out my brains on pillows. Like a bather caught and skinned by rollers, I shall toss for an eternity in surf, when the air-eating spirit in my nostrils is maddened by its heavy coat of earth. Now for your rest, eyes where my passions lay, waterlogged in flashing muscles all day, well below the waterline and blotted in their acids, salt mortis sets your lids. Baked on hell's rubbish heap, I go on smouldering, with my spirit at its breath of breath, incapable of beating out the flames, and hatches are raised cautiously by all the senses. Oh, once you have taken this draught of black air, you would be glad of infinity to get your bearings.
When we checked what reviewers made of this poem, preparing this presentation today, we chanced on one in the Church Times, and it said, the lines of this poem, it was written by Caroline Bowder in the Church Times, the lines of this poem express a sordidness like that of Tracy Emin's bed. But in this case, far more interesting and vivid. The poetic life is dangerous and intoxicating, uncorseted, rotten. As a poet, Tonks was what we might these days call a hater. I'm quoting it, not me saying this. And there's an undertow of violence in so much of her work. When she writes, she smashed the poppadom on her plate and ate the ruins. You marvel at her creativity and way of seeing the world in an Indian restaurant in Soho, but you are not surprised. that ambiguity once more. The wish to be and the desire to sleep for all eternity. Yeah? The solitary's bedroom, now for the night. It reminds me somehow of that verse by Italian poet Leopardi, Il naufragarmi dolce in questo mare, and to shipwreck is sweet in this sea. As we have here today, he's going to hate me for this, but we have here a contributor to the Church Times, who is Father Nicholas, and he writes on art in the Church Times, and he's a cleric of the Church of England. So perhaps it would be interesting to see what your own views are on the poetry of Rosemary Tonks at the end, to start the questions later, or the conversation rather than questions. But since now, no pressure there, as they say, my dear. Nicola is a very good friend of mine, so I can tease him as much as I like. You pay later. But let's your revenge. But let's now go to Rome, since we are in a religious mood.
Rome. It's the cafe and the boredom in the semi-dark. People have a certain rank elegance, and the dirt-encrusted street with its great jar of water keeps my blood too fresh and truculent for work. All these Roman fops going by, the shuffling, the dripping water jar, and the dark cafe built for stealing people. And the walls are full of musk. It's baked into them, the temptation to live. Even a bad conversation in a street that's built for boredom and odorous with water. When there's less time, my life, my work, my hopes, every step leads to an assignation. It's the elan of cafe life on a hot night. The street that's full of modern love talk, like a room. It's the jade breath of the water jar. That is mortality for the blood that is too insolent for work.
There is a lot of meat in Rosemary Tonks' poetry, and there are many mattresses and beds. One reviewer wrote, the mattresses are dirty and the meat is turning. Everything is tainted, marbled with decay. But this is precisely what it gives its taste. Tonks claimed Baudelaire and Rimbaud as her inspirations, as we have said. And well, this is true in obvious way, like the allure of the city, the flaneur, and all that I said before. The exoticization of the underside of the city is what she calls in her line that evokes Patrick Hamilton, the flavour beneath the flagstones of London. This push-pull fascination and disgust, what emerges most strongly from reading her is that she shares the fascination of Baudelaire and Rimbaud with decay, or more exactly with the cusp of decay, what the French call la faisandée, gaminess, when the meat is about to turn, when it's most richly textured and darkly flavoursome. The next poem features meat and decay. Escape.
It is among the bins and dormitories of cities where the busker wins his bread by turning music on a spit, and the heavens have the dirt of the great sty upon their sides, that one goes to gourmandize upon escape. Where alleys are so narrow that the fates like meat porters can scarcely pass with their awkward burden in its muslin bandages and carry off the rubble safely to their graves. Where every shadow opens a bordel at sunset as decay moves into cloakrooms of blue velvet in red cheese. These are the last of the great kitchens, and your soul knows half the flavor lies underfoot in dirty flagstones, when like a chef it makes a point of bringing in to show before you dine, escape, still active in a net, auroras, icy champagnes upon its wings.
Oh, city, unreal, as Baudelaire would say, and famously quoted by T.S. Eliot in The West End. And this next poem we're going to read features mattresses and bedrooms. It's arguably her best known poem, or certainly one of the most anthologized of her. It's called Story of Hotel Room, and Sarah Parrish, the actress, described it as one of the most truthful of love poems, dealing, as it does, with the tantalizing temptation of infidelity. Story of a Hotel Room.
Sorry, did you want to come to the front over here and take a seat? Okay. Story of a hotel room. Thinking we were safe in sanity, we went in to make love. All the same, idiots to trust the little hotel bedroom. Then, in the gloom, and who does not know that pair of shutters with the awkward hook on them, all screeching whispers? Very well then, in the gloom we set about acquiring one another urgently, but on a temporary basis, only as guests, just guests of one another's senses. But idiots to feel so safe you hold back nothing because the bed of cold electric linen happens to be illicit. To make love as well as that is ruinous. Londoner, Parisian, someone should have warned us that without permanent intentions you have absolutely no protection. If the act is clean, authentic, sumptuous, the concurring deep love of the heart follows the naked work, profoundly moved by it.
Well, a masterly study of an adulterous encounter, as I believe you said in one essay you wrote once on Rosemary Tonks. A masterly study of an adulterous encounter, and I do think it's quite interesting and true, actually, as the critic said, Sarah Parrish. Given her views on love and fidelity, it's perhaps worth wondering what sort of marriage she had, and indeed why she married at all so young. She was only 20 when she married Michael Lightband Mickey in 1949. He was, as I said before, an engineer, and because of his work they moved to India and to Pakistan, and in Calcutta poor Rosemary contracted typhoid fever. In Karachi she contracted polio, which left her with a disability. Unable to fully use her right hand, she taught herself to write with the left to do what she needed, no? And she wore a black glove on her right hand. The comedian Stuart Lee, a huge Rosemary fan, I believe this is in a prologue to the Bloated, the only novel that's published so far, by Virago. He says he likes to think of her as an early Alvin Stardust, or Mark, wait for it, or Mark E. Smith from The Fall, or, rather intriguingly, a Michael Jackson. I don't know what he was thinking of. After a year alone in Paris, you decide. We'll talk about it later. I didn't see the connection, but maybe with Mark E. Smith. Yeah, they were both tough cookies, I think. The comedian said that about her. She, after a year alone in Paris, leaving the husband in Karachi or whatever, she was recovering, remember, so she left and she was on her own. She went to Paris for a year. She lived glamorously. He had money, I suppose. She lived in the Ile Saint Louis, which I suppose then wasn't as expensive as it is now. She went to see Baudelaire's grave and everybody's grave, and she read all the French symbolists and all the French poets, and she became very much the incarnation of Baudelaire. You may think that her marriage was trouble, that she went to Paris to escape or something, but in fact it was quite the opposite. She loved her husband, and she was actually very witty and not sort of like sour person or anything. No, she was witty. Maybe she was she was famous for her one-liners. So maybe that's the connection with all these people. Some of her one-liners and her witticism seem to undermine the very marriage she had just entered. She said, for example, "Love is quite incidental to any successful relationship, whereas the courtier's life is indispensable." And she also wrote a poem and a love affair. These are the great illnesses between the ages of 19 and 30. Despite these observations, the marriage, while it lasted, was successful, and the divorce, when it came, was to hit her very hard. Mickey had loved Rosemary deeply, but couldn't deal with her adultery and erratic behavior, which was probably connected with her undiagnosed mental health issues. He also had affairs, but apparently not on the scale of hers. And possibly because of her affairs, he had affairs. We don't know that, but that's what people seem to think. She was quite a handful in that respect, a liberated lady, and in that time that was judged very hard. We can talk about that as well later. Being a woman in the 1960s was no picnic, famously. It was a rock and roll male war. So, they married, but they separated because of all these affairs. She moved out of number 46 Downshire Hill in Hampstead, a very elegant address, even then. She moved to a property next door. And she lived separately with Mickey, but with the aggrieved fact that Mickey had another woman living with him at number 46 next door. By the time the divorce came through in January 1976, it can't have been easy for them to live so close. But Mickey may have wanted that proximity to make sure she was okay. The divorce was a contributory factor in her mental breakdown. Despite having what must have been, in the later years, a troubled marriage, she regarded marriage as sacrosanct and couldn't cope with Mickey having divorced her. However, he did set her up well financially, with funds, and she had financial security. Neil Astley from Broddock's Books, when he assembled her poetry together in that book, the second to £10, decided to call the collection after one of her shorter poems called Bedouin of the London Evening. Despite its brevity, it does represent her work and her landscape perfectly. So Elena is going to demonstrate now.
Bedouin of the London Evening. 10 years in your cafes and your bedrooms, great city, filled with wind and dust. Bedouin of the London evening. On the way to a restaurant, my youth was lost. And like a medium who falls into a trance so deep, she can be scratched to death by her familiar at its leisure. I have lain rotting in a dressing gown while being savaged horribly by wasted youth. I have been young too long, and in a dressing gown, my private modern life has gone to waste.
I have been young too long. Quite a bewitching phrase, I think. And haven't we all? Isn't it always time we grew up a bit? It's quite impossible to read this poem today here without knowledge of what was to happen to Rosemary, because she eventually renounced poetry. And it is inevitable that we look at the writing and scan the landscape for signs of trouble, and her poems, full of anger, dismay, and abuse, are just only too happy to oblige. Little escapes her caustic eye. The Chicago Times Review said, the quality of her disgust, modern, precise, odorous, with its seedy Soho life and litany of lost lovers, makes her both look modern and detached. But at the same time, her use of italics and sardonic exclamation marks can make her look like a crabby grandmother. Chicago Times. So, let's see what the morning after, the evening before, holds for a London Bedouin.
Bedouin of the London morning. We come into the cafe at dawn. There are water fogs and civilization is white. If you knew the exotic disgust that grips me after another bestial night as we come in, broken, dark, with inks and dusts and gases, like those whose private apartment is the street. After an all-night conversation, when the street wind hangs on snarling to your coat, if you knew my half-erotic convulsion of loathing for the night, I'm like a sleeper when his mouth is stopped up by some terrible mud crust the dream has crammed there, and the soul goes pressing up against, trying to scream with hydrophobia, and can only murmur. Some love thought turns his mouth to blood with longing only a moment later. In the workman's cafe, if you knew the almost voluptuous sense of frustration when you're broken, and the morning's alcoholic as a lily.
A bestial night, disgust, and yet always that ambivalence, even in that ghastly morning. Loathing, yes, but with a half-erotic convulsion. Sitting here in Soho in 2024, we feel modern and knowing, of course, as I said before. It's 60 years since Rosemary Tonks walked the streets outside this pub. She drank in pubs like this one and cafes, and she whiled away the hours. I talked earlier about London, the sex invention, the Beatles' first LP, the swinging London. When so much seemed possible and iconoclasm was in the air everywhere in this London where we are, in this Soho where we are gathered today. Certainly Soho was in the vanguard of the change, but in the poems you have heard already this evening, you feel that Rosemary's London, Rosemary's Soho, is not the London of the Beatles, the Kings. She was not a dedicated follower of fashion. If anything, London still was wrapped in her life and poetry in a slightly Dickensian dustiness of gas, light and fog and mud. And Rosemary writes of that landscape very well. The flagstones are dirty, the pubs drafty, the streets are dark, the cafes serve cabbage. There is no neon lights, but things are about to change. Technology will collaborate with her work, and we will end now this part, well, in a moment, of the evening with Badly Chosen Lover from her second collection, which we're going to discuss, comment with in the second part. With this very brief BBC radiophonic workshop, who had recently been kind of discovered or remastered or something. And we hear her own voice for the first time this evening, and how she worked with the BBC radiophonic workshop, who had recently created this Doctor Who theme music. Who's the lady that wrote that? The musician. There you are. You work with her on this. Okay. But first, let's hear Elena reading this poem. Badly Chosen Lover.
Badly Chosen Lover. Criminal, you took a great piece of my life, and you took it under false pretenses. That piece of time, in the clear muscles of my brain, I have the lens and jug of it. Books, thoughts, meals, days, and houses, half Europe, spent like a coarse banknote. You took it, leaving mud and cabbage stumps. And criminal, I damn you for it, very softly. My spirit broke her fast on you, and Turk, you fed her with the breath of your neck. In my brain's clear retina, I have the stolen love behavior. Your heart, greedy and tepid, brothel meat, gulped it like a flunky with erotica. And very softly, criminal, I damn you for it.
Let's hear.
Badly chosen lover. Criminal, you took a great piece of my life, and you took it under false pretenses, that piece of time. In the clear muscles of my brain, I have the lens and jug of it. Books, thoughts, meals, days and houses, half Europe, spent like a coarse banknote. You took it, leaving mud and cabbage stumps. Criminal. 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 And criminal, I damn you for it, very softly, very softly, very softly. My spirit broke her fast on you, and Turk, you fed her with the breath of your neck, the breath of your neck, the breath of your neck. In my brain's clear retina, I have the stolen love behavior. Thoughts, meals, days, and houses. Your heart, greedy and tepid, brothel meat, gulped it like a flunky with erotica. And very softly, criminal, I damn you for it.
Well, nothing if not avant-garde. That trumpet, that kind of Doctor Who, going back in time, we are doing here tonight. But let's take a break from all this intensity. Let's have a drink, please, in the bar here if you can, because as I said, the more you drink, the better.